investigation into so-called Russia collusion, and the committee has found no evidence whatsoever of any collusion between the Trump campaign, administration, and Russia. In fact, the committee concludes it disagrees with U.S. intelligence community assessment that Russians tried to boost Donald Trump in his presidential campaign. Also tonight, authorities in Austin, Texas, are hunting for the person or persons responsible for 3 package explosions. One of those explosions occurred 10 days ago, killing a 39-year-old. 2 today, killing a teenager, and authorities say they are connected. We'll have a live report from Austin coming up here tonight in just moments. And the Republican establishment also gearing up to fight President Trump on tariffs. The rhinos, who are doing the bidding of the Business Roundtable and Chamber of Commerce, are now pushing for significant changes in the president's tariffs. And breaking tonight, President Trump blocking Broadcom's $117 billion attempted takeover of Qualcomm, citing national security. We take all of that up here tonight and much more. Our special guest, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, the president has tasked him with talking to the European Union about eliminating EU tariffs against U.S. products. And Judicial Watch's Chris Farrell on the House Intelligence Committee's conclusion of no collusion. Also joining us, conservative commentator Michelle Malkin on the president's push for the wall. Joining us as well, the brother of slain Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. Kent Terry joins us here tonight, calling on the Justice Department to reopen its investigation of the Fast and Furious Department of Justice-led gun-running scandal. Our top story, Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee today finally ended the investigative phase of its year-long Russia probe. A 150-page draft report has found no evidence of collusion whatsoever, no coordination or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians. The report also demonstrating how anti-Trump research made its way from Russian sources to the Clinton campaign, and it addresses problem contacts between senior intelligence community officials and the left-wing media in this country. Congressman Mike Conaway, who has been leading the Russia probe for the Intelligence Committee, just discussed the committee's conclusions on special report.
We've reached that point where we've interviewed all the folks we need to. We've looked at some 300,000 documents, 73 interviews that we've done across the course of the city, trying to answer the 4 questions that were originally set out for a committee to answer. Yes, the Russians tried to interfere with our election process. Yes, they had cyber attacks, active measures going on. We could find no evidence of collusion between either campaign and the Russians.
There are still 2 committees in the Senate investigating Russia's 2016 election meddling, the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. In Texas tonight, authorities searching for a possible serial bomber. It appears that is precisely what is at work. Texas Governor Greg Abbott now offering a $15,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the suspect or suspects involved with 3 deadly package explosions in Austin. Fox reporter Casey Claiborne is live in Austin and has the latest for us. Good evening, Casey.
Lou, you're looking at the scene of the 3rd mysterious package explosion in Austin in just the past 10 days. Second one today. All similar incidents. Some sort of box is left on a front porch and whatever's in it explodes. The ATF, FBI, Austin police, and others are here investigating. This all started several days ago when a 39-year-old Austin man named Anthony House opened a package. The explosion killed him. That was March the 2nd. This morning, Austin police say a 17-year-old young man was killed inside his home after bringing the package inside. A woman he was with was injured. And then around 11:50 this morning, police got another call about an explosion here on the 6700 block of Galindo. Police Chief Ryan Manley says a 75-year-old Hispanic woman was taken to the hospital. She is in critical but stable condition. Manley says the package exploded when she picked it up. He says he doesn't believe these packages are being delivered by the Postal Service or any major delivery company.
These are box-type deliveries, and so again, that's why we're saying if you receive a suspicious package, a suspicious cardboard package, but really I don't want to limit this to anything. If you receive a suspicious package, then call us and let us come out, because a device like this can be hidden in many different ways. It's not time to panic, but it's time to be vigilant, and it's time to pay attention. It's time to pull together as a city and a community and solve this.
They're trying to figure out what links these three victims.
Of course, the chief is telling the people of Austin, if there is a suspicious package on your front porch, do not touch it. Actually, go to the back of your house, and if you can, just get out and call 911.
They're saying that if you see anything suspicious or if something doesn't look right, you need to call.
Casey, thank you very much. Casey Claiborne reporting from Austin. Turning now to the president's efforts to build the wall along the southern border. The president set to visit San Diego tomorrow. There he will inspect the 8 prototypes built for the proposed wall with Mexico. At a campaign rally Saturday, President Trump revealed he's sticking to his promise to have Mexico pay for that border wall.
We are building the wall 100%. But the president of Mexico calls, Mr. President, we would like you to make a statement that Mexico will not pay for the wall. I said, are you crazy? You think I'm going to pay? I'm not making that statement. He said, well, you have to. I said, is it a deal breaker? He said, yes. I said, bye-bye, we're not making a deal.
Tomorrow will also be the president's first visit to California since becoming president. Just last week, the Trump administration sued the state of California over its dangerous sanctuary city policies. Joining us tonight, Michelle Malkin, nationally syndicated conservative columnist, author, and host of Michelle Malkin Investigates on CRTV. I did say author. I meant to say best-selling author always. Michelle, good to have you with us. The president,
good to be with you, Lou.
It's great to see you. The president on his way to California to look at prototypes, asserting again in that speech in Pennsylvania Saturday night that it's going to be built, and that's all there is to it. Your thoughts?
Well, President Trump always runs to the fire. You know, Jerry Brown blamed President Trump for starting a war on California. But the fact is that California has waged a war, particularly on federal immigration laws and on American sovereignty for a long, long time. I started out my newspaper career in Los Angeles and saw at ground zero in the 1990s so many American citizens and law-abiding citizens and residents of California being crushed under the weight of the costs of illegal immigration. And of course, it wasn't just an economic security issue. It was a public safety and national security issue. And finally, through so many other open borders administrations, both Democrat and Republican, we finally have a president who's serious about the most fundamental duty of government, which is to protect its citizens. And this wall cannot happen soon enough, Lou.
It can't happen soon enough, and the president has made it clear that sanctuary cities, he's ordered the Justice Department to move against them, and they are doing so. In fact, sanctuary cities, the state of California is a sanctuary state. How soon do you think we're going to see a real response from California, and do you think the president will prevail?
I hope the president prevails, and the fact that he is heading there, like I said, to ground zero, shows that he is keeping this most fundamental campaign promise of his. And I think that we're going to see the craziness of the resistance. They had been very quiet, and there have been a lot of security measures in place at the site where these 8 prototypes have been built. So far, there hasn't been any kind of civil disobedience. But look, I mean, we have seen the violence of so many of the worst of the never-Trumpers and that kind of extremism. So I hope that, I hope that our president is well protected. In terms of consequences, I have said that lawsuits like the one that Jeff Sessions announced last week are really only the start. And it isn't until we finally see many of these racketeers, these colluders among government officials. I'm talking about the sheriffs and the police chiefs, the mayors like Libby Schaaf in Oakland, and yes, the Attorney General Xavier Becerra and the governor himself. These people need to be threatened with criminal prosecution. We haven't seen that yet.
And the audience of this broadcast, we brought that question to them, and they answered more than 90% saying they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Michelle, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us here tonight. Michelle Malkin.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. America hasn't had a trade surplus in 43 years. President Trump now touting his America First trade agenda as Congress tries to oppose his tariffs.
A lot of steel mills are now opening up because of what I did. And not all of my friends on Wall Street love it, but we love it because we know what it does.
Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross takes up the Trump tariffs and making trade fair for America. President Trump calling for more pressure against sanctuary cities as he heads to California. Much more on the battle over illegal immigration and border security when we continue. President Trump says Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross will hold talks with European Union officials demanding an end to their unfair trade barriers and tariffs against U.S. products. Speaking in Pennsylvania over the weekend, the president talked about the Europeans' poor treatment of American farmers and manufacturers.
I said, open up your countries. That's countries. They banded together. Why did they band together? To screw the United States on trade. And that's okay. They're allowed, you know. Actually, here it would be called a monopoly. It wouldn't be allowed.
Joining us tonight, the man who is on his way to the European Union to straighten their trade practices and policies out, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Great to have you with us, Mr. Secretary.
Good to be on, Lou.
Let's start with the tariffs that the president and your administration are putting forward here. 25% against the dumping of imported steel, 10% against aluminum imports. And there's a hue and a cry in large measure in the business press as well as the political, screaming because they think somehow the United States should be the permanent victim of every unfair trading partner that we've got, whether it's Germany, whether it's China, Japan, you name it. It's the most ignorant thing I've ever seen.
Well, I think, Lou, people have gotten into a state of mind and change they regard as being threatening. But the reaction we've gotten from the global community, while it certainly has been very negative, it also has served as a wake-up call. And now I think for the first time, there's a good chance that we will have concerted international action dealing with overproduction, dealing with subsidized dumping, and dealing with overcapacity. But I do have to correct one little thing. You said I'm on my way to Europe. I'm not. Ambassador Lighthizer and I are coordinating together that activity. I'm right here in Washington at the moment.
My apologies. I did not mean to boost you for a trip you didn't want to take.
Yeah, I have 1,000,000 miles anyway.
You're going to get a million more at least probably this year. The reality is that the European Union, most people are oblivious to the trading relationship between the United States and Germany, or whether it be the number of countries we have trade deficits with. The Germans beat us like a drum and expect us to take it and build a couple of plants and then say, it's all fine, don't worry about it. But it's really not fine, and it's really not free trade. And the other expression that our Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, and the intelligentsia of the Republican and Democratic political establishment, they say it's free trade. There's nothing free about it. And if there's any doubt, just ask the middle class of this country who have seen their jobs wiped out because of so-called free trade that is cost. We haven't had a trade surplus since 1975. You can't straighten them out soon enough to suit me.
Well, we're going to try very, very hard. I think the tragedy is that we got into this mess due to the activities of former administrations. Right after World War II, there was a probably correct policy to build up Europe and build up Asia after the war, but they forgot to time denominate it. So concessions that were perfectly logical to make to Germany in 1951 are no longer at all appropriate. Same
and to be fair, the leadership until Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, the leadership of both the Republican and the Democratic Party wanted to go along with it as if we were the wealthiest nation there is, and that we could spend whatever trillions of dollars we want. That 43 years of trade deficits consecutive has cost trillions and trillions of dollars in economic growth. We've just squandered that money. And it's absurd. And if it were not for the election of Donald Trump and this administration, of which you are such a key member, I mean, I can't even imagine we'd be a debtor nation in perpetuity.
Well, remember, economic security is military security. Without a strong economy, without improving our relative balance sheet, without improving our cash flow, it's going to be very hard to defend ourselves in a world that's filled with actual and potential enemies.
And with that, Secretary Ross, we appreciate you being with us. How soon do you think that you'll be able to reason with the Europeans and successfully reduce their trade barriers that have been there since the 60s, really?
Well, they really have, and we're going to do it as quickly as we can. But remember, the decision-making process in Europe is even more complicated than here, because you have all the separate countries, but they can't literally negotiate for themselves. They have to go through the European Commission, which is an even worse bureaucracy than anything you can imagine in Washington.
And the last answer we should ever take from Europe is it's complicated. They make it complicated, and willfully so, as you well know.
Oh, absolutely.
Secretary Ross, great to have you with us. Good luck. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou.
Great to see you. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Do you have any confidence that the Republican Capitol Hill leadership will support President Trump's tariffs and his efforts to run down all barriers to U.S. exports with the EU, China, and Japan? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street today, stocks closing mix. The Dow down 157 points. The S&P down 4. The Nasdaq up 28 points, closing at a new record high. Volume on the big board, 3.2 billion shares. Qualcomm shares plunging and extended trading. That after President Trump blocked Singapore-based Broadcom's takeover of the chip maker, citing national security. Gasoline prices, we are told, could reach a tipping point this spring. That, according to a AAA consumer survey. 20% of those consumers replying they would change their driving habits if gasoline hits $2.75 a gallon. Well, it was $4 just a few years ago. I think some people are, well, maybe getting a little prematurely excited about gas prices. What do you think? A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, the House Intelligence Committee finds no evidence of collusion whatsoever between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And when, then, will Robert Mueller end his extraordinary, wasteful witch hunt? We take it up with Chris Farrell of Judicial Watch here next. The Justice Department failing to charge former intelligence chief James Clapper with lying to Congress. The statute of limitations running out today. At issue, his testimony 5 years ago that even Clapper admitted was clearly erroneous.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Joining us tonight, Chris Farrell. He's the Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. We just listened to the DNI, former DNI. James Clapper lied to Congress, straight up.
And he takes a walk, which is the ever frustrating point of the disparity of treatment and prosecutorial indiscretion that the American people are so incredibly fed up with.
Yeah, and this two-tier, it may be more than that, but at least two-tier system of justice is enough to leave all of us nauseous. It is outrageous that this would just come and go without comment further.
And we're still compounded today. On the way over to the studio, I saw a published report that indicates that Clapper was leaking to the news media about the phonied-up dossier. And so now there's another whole round of Clapper-related selective leaking and lying. He's a national security problem on 2 feet.
Yeah, he and you can add a couple of other pair. James Comey, for the fired director of the FBI, and John Brennan, CIA head. The three of them looked like they were a dog and pony show organized to go on the road against the President Trump and say whatever the hell they wanted.
These guys are three sort of self-anointed commissars. They should really change their title. They are operatives of the worst examples of the deep state. They know better. They selectively leak. They attempt to steer elections. They attempt to manipulate the public. They cozy up with friendly news media to plant stories. They are truly, in the worst sense, political operatives, and that's why I use the word commissar.
Why isn't there consequence for people who've run some of the most important agencies and held the most important post in DNI, arguably? Why isn't there a consequence for their conduct? Why isn't there a standard of conduct for people who have access to the country's most important secrets, its intelligence and counterintelligence operations?
Well, I can tell you, if you were a GS-13 intel analyst in one of the alphabet soup agencies, they'd cut your head off. There would be no hesitation for any of this same behavior. It is impossible to rationalize or explain, as you mentioned earlier, this two-tier system. And the consequences for the little people who have to pay attention to the laws is quite dire. But for this anointed class of commissars, they walk away unscathed, and in about 6 months you'll probably see a book.
Yeah, well, maybe even less if it happens to be James Comey's book, which I still haven't quite figured out how that worked. Let's turn to Special Counsel Robert Mueller, as it seems we always must. House Intel Committee says absolutely no evidence whatsoever of collusion between the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, and the Russians. End of story, but they persist in the Senate, and Mueller persists, of course, as special counsel. It's ludicrous what we were witnessing. Your thoughts about how this resolves?
Yeah, well, Mueller is a prosecutor, and prosecutors are built to get scalps, right? They want indictments and convictions. That's how they're arranged. That's how they're built. It's what they do. So he's picked up a couple along the way, but frankly, they're kind of minor league, third-tier things that don't touch in any way directly upon the president or his campaign. So,
especially when the effect of that prosecutorial zeal that you're talking about on the part of Mueller is to subvert the policies and the administration of President Donald Trump.
Or they spend a lot of time looking at Manafort, but somehow scrupulously avoid looking at Podesta.
Right.
I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Manafort's crooked and they don't like what he's doing, we'll take a long, hard look at the 9 or 10 other mostly Democratic political consultants operating in the Ukraine. So it's just there isn't even the pretense of being even-handed here. No. They've identified the target audience, and they're going to investigate the hell out of them until they get a conviction. That's just the way it works.
Well, hopefully not for too much longer. Chris Farrell, Judicial Watch. Chris, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
We're coming right back. There is much, much more. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump reversing 3 decades of weak presidential leadership on North Korea.
Neither would Bush and neither would Clinton. They had their shot. Clinton gave away billions and billions of dollars. And as soon as they made the deal, the following day, they started working on making more nukes.
We take up the prospect of peace talks with Kim Jong-un. Ed Rollins and Michael Goodwin join us next. And a daring diver comes face-to-face with a great white shark. We'll show you the jaws-dropping close encounter next. Stay with us. From what you could call the lunatic fringe files now, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren has ruled out taking a DNA test to prove her Native American ancestry. She says she's not running for president. What she didn't say was, please, please, President Trump, don't hit me anymore. And Rhino Senator Jeff Flake, who's so weak he's retiring from the Senate, now says he believes a candidate with his, quote, traditional conservative views. Are you kidding me? He said that with a, well, reasonably straight face. He should challenge President Trump in 2020 in the primary. Guess who he thinks would just be boffo for that job? Flake now pushing legislation to block the president's tariffs, along with Senator Mike Lee. I don't know what's going on there. Joining us tonight to let us figure that out and help us figure it out, former Reagan political director Ed Rollins, now Hofstra University senior presidential fellow, New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin, both Fox Business contributors. Great to have you both here.
Thank you.
Let's start with the presidential fellow, if I may.
Kind of step aside.
And most brilliant political analyst in the country.
It's a school I could not have gotten in with a shotgun, but it's okay. they let me teach.
Let's turn to this business with Senator Flake and Mike Lee suddenly are worried about tariffs. Who are these people, and who do they think they are?
Well, Flake is someone who obviously got very diminished in his Senate. He had a house.
Did you say he diminished himself?
Yes, I said that. And as you said earlier, he had to get out of the race. A young man who obviously had to get out of the Senate because he couldn't win. Was running second, third, depending on how many candidates were in a primary against him. And my sense is he's just trying to be relevant, kind of like Kasich. I think the only way to be relevant as a Republican is to be anti-Trump, which obviously makes you irrelevant.
And Mike Lee, who seems like his perpetual role is somebody's little buddy, whether it's Cruz or whether it's Flake suddenly, I don't know. You know that Romney is going to have a little buddy. What is the deal with him suddenly in tariffs and opposing the president? He's standing up on what?
Yeah.
More trade deficits? That's what he wants, smaller middle class?
And also, look, whatever they were to pass, the president would veto it, presumably. And why do it knowing that in the middle of these campaigns and all these special elections coming up, where you would think the Republicans would either draw the conclusion we're going to hang separately or hang together?
Yeah, and our middle class has figured out who's going to be paying the price for so-called free trade. The middle class has diminished over the last quarter century in this country, not prospered. Until this president was elected in office, we did not see the middle class prospering at all. And now that has reversed. It's because of his policies. And now the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce have decided that their deficit pure politics and economics are the perfect solution again.
Well, the job numbers on Friday were extraordinary. The people are starting to get their tax refunds already. I mean, in the sense of their withholding in their paychecks. And I think to a certain extent, this economy is booming, just as Trump said it would.
It's not to a certain extent. It is booming.
It is booming.
Categorically, it's booming. Jobs are being created at rates we've never seen in the last month.
A misuse of my terms. Thank you.
Well,
thank you. Thank you for correcting me.
I get so tired of the left-wing
I appreciate
media.
it. I'm not a left-winger, so just
No, I know you're not. But I get so tired of the left-wingers trying to diminish the president's accomplishments. I can't stand it.
Well, you know, one thing I think that we are seeing here, Lou, with Mike Lee and Flake and the others, is that the divergence within the Republican Party, Donald Trump's base is not their base. I mean, he was very much a crasher.
You're not even on the same planet.
That's right. So the people who would benefit from the tariffs, the working class people who have been in these hollowed out towns, they lost their jobs, they lost their industries. These people have not been voting for Republicans by and large. Certainly in Pennsylvania, certainly in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. That's who delivered the presidential victory. Mike Lee doesn't represent those people. Jeff Flake doesn't represent those people.
What in the world does he represent? He doesn't want to see the middle class prosper. He wants more deficits and greater national debt. He wants greater external debt as a result of those trade deficits. You know, Peter Navarro has been working on these issues for a very long time, focusing on China, focusing on the issues that matter to this middle class. And then you have the establishment. I love this. The establishment loves to say it's not a zero-sum game. You tell that to the people who've lost, the millions of people who've lost their jobs because of outsourcing, the offshoring of production, the stupid free trade agreements that are free on only one side, that is, on the United States side. while they crush our middle class and our working men and women and families.
Well, I think if you look back on modern history, I mean, Ronald Reagan took advantage of the populist Democrats, working class, very similar to what the Trump did, won 2 landslide victories and got Bush in for a third. Bush started moving away from those issues, lost the re-election. Romney didn't run on these issues. McCain didn't run on these issues. And I think to a certain extent, the Republican establishment just always thought Trump would kind of go away, and he's now owns that party.
Yeah, go away. 14 months, not even in office at this point. And already he's done more than Obama in 8 years for the American middle class, for Hispanic workers, for African American workers. And for all workers. You know, what a novel idea. All workers. That's what he said on the campaign trail. He's going to bring back prosperity for everybody, and damned if it took him 13 whole months to do that. Let's stop with one last question, and that is on the House Intelligence Committee. Your thoughts about where we go now? No collusion whatsoever is their finding.
It's a very big deal for the president.
It's huge.
And I think that, of course, everybody will try to belittle the findings. The Democrats haven't agreed to this. The New York Times has already said, you know, how does it compare to Mueller? But look, I think it's a very big event for the president. We talked last time, Lou, about the special counsel. I have to say, I still think that at some point that issue is going to come around again, because as this thing gets settled, what about the Clappers? What about all of those other people? Clapper will not be covered by the Inspector General report. Somebody has to be prosecuted for all of the law-breaking that occurred in the Obama people who have left government.
And don't forget John Brennan and James Comey.
Absolutely. I think the president said his case proven effectively today. They should close that investigation down. The House probably did a better job than anybody else, and they found nothing. So let's move on.
There's no shame amongst the rhino leaders of both the House and the Senate and the Republican Party, is there? Well, certainly none of the Democratic side. Come to think of it, where is a sense of shame or pride
it's
or
always a question
integrity?
Of who you're being compared to. If you're being compared to Nancy Pelosi, they look pretty darn good.
Well,
yes, they do.
One savant's opinion. Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin, thanks so much for being with us. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you have any confidence the GOP Capitol Hill leadership will support President Trump's tariffs and his efforts to remove all barriers to U.S. exports with the European Union, China, and Japan? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And please now roll our nightly video. It's that exciting moment. Watch as this massive shark, lunges at a free meal in the waters of Mexico. They even caged this free meal for them to make it easy, I guess. The shark trying to poke a diver cage, but he bravely pushes the animal away. Look at that thing. I hope he didn't pay a lot of money for that thrill. There's a really clever move right there. Grab the shark by the nose. Okay. Up next, rhinos doing the bidding of the business establishment, looking to obstruct the president on tariffs, taking full aim at our middle class, working men and women and their families. We'll have a full report for you on the latest from Capitol Hill establishment leadership. You're not going to be surprised by some of it, unfortunately. We'll be right back. Congressional obstructionists are mounting a challenge to the president's America First aluminum and steel tariffs, and rhino leaders of both parties, but particularly the GOP, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, doing absolutely nothing to stop that effort. Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel has our report.
Tariffs are awful. Tariffs married to uncertainty is probably even worse.
Arizona Senator Jeff Flake is just one of several Republican senators preparing legislation to derail President Trump's plan for new tariffs on steel and aluminum.
This is a counterproductive, as well as result in retaliatory actions by our trade partners. And again, it just injects uncertainty into an economy that was really doing quite well.
It won't be easy, though. The president's acting under authority to restrict imports through tariffs for national security reasons and can do so without congressional approval. And that's assuming Congress can even get a majority to vote for blocking the president.
I do not think that would even pass. You'd have to have both committees, the House and the Senate, pass it. If it gets vetoed by the president, it'd have to be override. I don't think that's going to happen.
Part of House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy's pessimism may be based on numbers. Overriding a presidential veto would require the support of 67 senators and 290 House members. And this isn't a partisan issue. Several Democrats, like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, support Mr. Trump's tariffs.
I was very glad to see what the president had done. We have negotiated one deal after another that has been great for big multinational corporations and been lousy for American workers.
With this being an election year, it would seem highly unlikely that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker Paul Ryan would take on the president. So the only hope for GOP lawmakers may be trying to convince the White House to fine-tune the tariffs.
If somebody's taking advantage of us, if our markets are open and they're not paying tariffs to get into this country, but yet we turn around and have to pay tariffs to get into their country, then something's wrong with that.
There is also a political calculation here with uncertainty over the impact of taking on a Republican president who's keeping a campaign pledge. Another reason why most expect Congress will ultimately cave. Lou?
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Emanuel reporting. A new chance for justice in an Obama-era scandal. We'll be talking with the brother of a slain Border Patrol agent who is now calling for the Trump administration to reopen the investigation into the Operation Fast and Furious scandal. Next. Six years of litigation coming to an end last week. The Justice Department agreed to hand over documents related to the botched Obama-era gun-running scandal. It was named that Operation Fast and Furious. The operation led to the murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry in December of 2010. Joining us tonight is Kent Terry. He is the brother of Brian Terry, and he has called for the Fast and Furious case to be reopened. He's encouraged by the Trump Justice Department's announcement that it's turning over documents withheld by former Attorney General Eric Holder. It is great to have you with us, Kent, and we appreciate you being with us. This is the frustration around this case. It has affected all of us who care about the country, the people who protect and serve the country, like your fallen brother. But to have an Attorney General like Eric Holder just basically lie and then not even correct the record for 10 months it's just appalling. You want accountability, right?
Yes, I want accountability for those that orchestrated it, that made sure these cartel members that are highly known criminals get weapons in their hands, and I think Sessions should go after these guys so it doesn't happen again. And you actually talked with Attorney General Holder. How did that conversation go? Well, first of all, I just knew everything coming out of his mouth was a complete lie to me. Just not to me, right to my mom's face. He just looked right at my mom and tried to say how sorry it was, but then we found out here he was one of the masterminds behind it. It was very upsetting, especially from coming from the justice system that we were depending on to give us answers.
And no one from DOJ, ATF, no one was held accountable. There were 200 murders, that's the estimate, in Mexico as a result of the guns that were shipped under ATF Justice Department efforts into the cartels. I mean, this is just stunning.
Well, even deaths as far as kids. I mean, back in January 2010, these weapons showed up at a teen's birthday party, killing 16 children. I mean, and then they're being so hypocritical now, Holder and Obama, about pushing for stricter gun laws. We're here, they're the problem.
They're the problem. Are you confident that Attorney General Sessions, that the Trump Justice Department will move ahead?
Yes, I believe that the Trump administration will move ahead on this. I met with Mr. Trump. He's a very sincere man. Like I said, he was very apologetic for what happened to my brother. Right. He was even apologizing for the previous administration, which he didn't have to do. But I believe it's going to move forward, and I just hope that that the documents are not redacted. So
that's a hope that is often not realized with these FOIA requests and what has proceeded. But with all these documents forward, your family, I mean, you have said you couldn't believe the language and the comments made in those emails released this past summer. Which was amongst the most upsetting to you?
You know, here I want justice for my brother, and for them to sit there and look at me in the face, say, "Oh, we're going to try to get you justice. We'll get you justice," and then turn around amongst each other and call me a nuisance. I mean, that was very upsetting. And not only that, they were talking about wiretapping. They were talking about they need to talk to more intelligent people within the family. It's just, it was very heartbreaking. It was very upsetting to me and my family.
Well, a new president, a new direction for the country, and a new attorney general who we hope and pray for all our sakes, but especially yours, you and your family who deserve justice on this this horrific crime. Kent Terry, we